Hey there, it's Julie J. I just wanted to do a quick tutorial about Quizlet. I'm here at Quizlet.com and this is just kind of my home screen. I decided to not do this as a Google Hangout for now. I had a window of time to film this and knew that I maybe wouldn't catch you guys in a way that you could join me live, so I thought I wouldn't bother with the Google Hangout setup and would just do this as a video that you can watch anytime. There's nothing to join in real time, just watch it at your leisure. Okay, so this is about Quizlet. Remember, we talked a lot about Quizlet as a device neutral tool, which just means that you can use it on anything, iPad or any computer or Chromebook. I actually don't even have most of my students on the app, though they can get the app if they want, and again, I teach big kids who can download their own apps at any time. Most of them are really not using the app. They're just using links that I provide them and going through it web-based. I don't ask them to create their own study sets, though I have had students do that, volunteer to create lists for the whole group. So, it kind of just depends on what you want from them. I guess I'm just telling you, if you don't have iPads, I think you can still go a long way on Quizlet.com, just using it web-based. And I also think you can go a long way with Quizlet even if your students are never in the website or the application. Even if you, as the teacher, are just using it to print flashcards or using it to run a Quizlet live game, I think it's still a good tool for you, whether it's just you using it as a grown-up or you having all of your students use it. Okay, so Quizlet.com is going to look like this when you first get there. So if you have an account already, it's going to ask you to log in, and you can see where I'm swirling around up here. I created mine so long ago that for some reason, I don't know, I did not connect it to my Google. I have a user ID and a password, and mine's not connected with Google, but I think if you're making a new account now, anything you can connect to Google probably makes sense because you don't have to keep track of as many IDs and passwords, so feel free to do that. It would maybe, when you first set it up, maybe some of you guys tried this last week and so you know the answer to this already, it might send you an email that you have to click something to verify your account. Either way though, that should be a pretty quick and simple process. And once you're in, you're going to get a screen that looks something like this. Now, this is the default screen that it goes to once you're logged in, and you can see that I'm logged in as me. My ID here is EHS Mrs. J, which is the same as what it is on Twitter and almost every other place online. Okay, so EHS Mrs. J here. This is the default. It's going to take you to this screen called Latest Activity. I have a lot of activity because I've used this a long time. You guys haven't, so perhaps you would get here and your screen would be like a little simpler. I also have made some classes in the past few years. You probably wouldn't have that. Okay, but it is pretty easy to navigate, so don't be like overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that's showing on my screen. You might not have quite as much. So create that account and verify it to get into Quizlet. You can see that there's still ads popping up here, which is okay. I know for grade school teachers, sometimes they're hesitant to want to use websites where a lot of ads pop up because you just can't really control the images in those ads. Not that they're necessarily anything inappropriate, but they could be distracting, I guess, at worst or at best. So take that for what it's worth. But if you're teaching little kids, you're probably not having them on Quizlet.com anyway. You would maybe be using it as a game tool for the whole class or to make study sets, but they probably wouldn't be there. I did, though, mention, I think when we were all together, that I've had college students give me a lot of feedback, like my former students who are in college, saying that this was really useful for them and that they started using it a lot when they were away from high school and on their own in college and needed it for something. So, this really might be a good digital tool to put in their toolbox. Anyway, okay, and you guys can tell I don't script these recordings, so I'm just kind of talking about things as I think of them. And if you think of questions about Quizlet that I didn't answer in this, feel free to just email me or tweet me, and maybe that's something I can add for you in a separate conversation, maybe when I film another one of my videos. Okay, here's the thing. Here's the best part of Quizlet, in my opinion. It's right here, the ability to search something that somebody else made. Okay? So I use Quizlet a lot, but I pretty infrequently make my own lists. I borrow from other people's, or I start with one of theirs and add some things to it. But a lot of what I'm looking for, someone else has made. And remember, I was helping our driver's ed teacher. Remember I talked about that? I searched for Drive Right. That's the name of his driver's ed textbook. Well, and when I searched that, a lot of things popped up. So he did not have to create a lot of sets because these things already existed. And you can always preview them. See, as I'm scrolling down, it's letting me look at what the terms are. So, excuse me, so you can vet this a little bit, like that you're picking a good list or not. And I think what a good tip is that, okay, so I'm pretending I'm the driver's ed teacher, right? I noticed that this guy, I don't know him, some other teacher named Mr. Jeff Smith has created these lists. And if I see that they're all pretty good, then what I start noticing is if he's the creator of the list, then I probably can trust that. Okay, so lots of options here then when you're looking at these lists. And then when you click on one, you have choices here. You can copy the Quizlet list. Now they're calling them study sets, but remember they're lists of terms, so don't be confused by the term study set. You can copy it, and what that's going to do is just save it to your own account. So instead of you having to look for this under Mr. Jeff Smith, you would then have it under your name. So copy is a good option. I don't even always do that, but you definitely can do it if you want it to show up under your name or your account. I do this a lot, add to class, okay? I can tell you, just to be really honest, putting my students in a class didn't really help them that much. I thought it would simplify the process. Like if I created a class for my seniors this year, for example, I called the class of 2016. So any senior, I teach two different sections of seniors, they would know. I didn't call it like first hour and fourth hour. I just grouped it all together and they knew they could join that class. I thought it would simplify things because they would see the list that I added to the class. But what they started doing is just searching themselves. And as long as they knew what they were looking for, it didn't really matter if they had joined the class. I think this is a helpful step, but I'm just giving you some real talk here about how that worked or didn't work for my students. And of course, you have options of making folders. You can share the list, so if you want to send it to someone, you can do that. There's some really good print options here too, I'll talk about in a minute. But here's where you get all these different versions of what you can do with the list. Okay, so you can just look at it in flashcard form. How hilarious, now I'm looking at these driver's ed terms. Like, I really have my own list of vocabulary terms. I don't know why now I'm stuck on driver's ed, but we'll just go with it. Okay, so I can look at it in flashcard, and you have some choices about how those cards flip. You can have it read out loud to you, which is sort of helpful for some terminology if pronunciation is an issue. So I like the fact that you would have some sound. And then this is nice too because you can randomize if it shows up, or if it shows up with both things on the front of the card, or if you want the term and then flip to the definition. Okay, so you have some settings there, and that's when you're in the card view. Okay, and my students use the card view when we play the game Quiz Trade, and you saw a video of my students doing that, and we talked about that in class. So for that particular cooperative learning structure, the flashcards is really good, and then that's helpful for people if they want to study terms that way. When you say learn, it's just kind of giving you a little quiz, so kids could do that on their own. I don't have my students do that, or I don't require them to do that for anything. They may be using it on their own to study. You have this thing called test too, so you can, it's actually creating things that you could share with your students or print. So if you're looking for something that's like a worksheet type option, you can make what they call a test with all these different options, and you can set all of those how you want them. And then you can print it. So it's, I think, pretty rare that I've ever used that feature, although I can think of a few times in the past couple of years when I have. But if you need something printed or printable, that's a good option for you there. And then these are like games, and they look a little bit different on the iPad version. So like what I'm showing you in this tutorial is all from my computer screen. If you had students on iPads, the game options are slightly different. It is pretty user-friendly and pretty intuitive. This is going to be like you're matching the term and the definition, and as soon as you drag them on top of each other, the words disappear, so you're trying to clear your screen. And then this is a game. Like I said, the games are a little different on the iPad. On the iPad, it's more like a memory or matching game. You're trying to match things. But this is the thing you're probably the most interested in, because we tried this in the workshop last week, and remember we talked about how it really didn't come online till about April of this year, but brand new feature with Quizlet, just a few months old. They have this thing called Quizlet Live. And remember, this isn't even my list, right? I'm just randomly looking at this driver's ed list. Anytime there's a list that has at least 12 terms, this has 24, so we know we're good, then you can activate Quizlet Live, right? So you're going to play this game with your students. This is a tutorial video, so if you need some help knowing how to activate Quizlet Live, or your students need an intro to that, you can play that. If I'm ready to just start, this is exactly the set of steps I used when we played it together in my classroom. I would create the game. This is your code. Your students are only ever going to Quizlet.live. Okay, and remember, sometimes by default in our brain we think that all web addresses have to start with HTTP or www. I mean, this is really simplified. If your students go to this once, encourage them to bookmark it or add like a button to their home screen on an iPad. They don't ever have to keep typing it in. It'll be really familiar to them after they've done it once. And then here's the game code. Now, the game will not activate unless you have 6 people to join, which I can't simulate here. I have a couple of devices, but I don't have 6. So I'm not going to actually start the game. But this is the process we went through when we played it in my classroom. You know, you're just waiting for people to join, and once you have 6, you can start, and it's all just a couple of clicks. And then remember the screen. Like if I was projecting to the screen, it's going to have a leaderboard, but students really don't have to see the screen to play. They're really just looking at their own device. And you know, I think that's kind of an interesting option because I like Kahoot. We talked some about Kahoot, but Kahoot is dependent on people being able to see the screen and read the screen. And depending on the setup in your classroom and how far away students are seated from the front of the room, which for me, you know, I talked about it a lot about how my room was crowded and we were filling every seat and I had kids way at the back. Visibility becomes a problem in a Kahoot then because they have to be able to read sometimes small text on a screen. That's not an issue with Quizlet Live because they're just looking at their own iPad. And so remember, you guys were doing that with some Kansas trivia. You're just looking at your own device, working at your table. You're not dependent on them seeing the screen. So that's kind of a good option if you're thinking about the difference between Kahoot and Quizlet Live as far as the game option. I think that's one of my favorites, that students don't have to see the screen for this. Okay. So if I want to create a list, and like I said, I do that pretty infrequently because I'm borrowing a lot of people's lists just by searching. Okay, but if you want to create a list, remember you're not even looking really for the word list. You're looking for the term study set, which isn't, I don't know, it's a little counterintuitive or maybe just not as predictable, but it's study set. That's what you're going to create, and it's just going to give you the option to click there. It's going to tell you to create your set. And remember, it's thinking that you're making a term with a definition, but you can interpret that however. Like think of this as the question, and this is the answer. Okay, so it doesn't just have to be like, here's a word and here's its definition. It could be like we were playing the other day, like something like what is the capital of Kansas, and then here is Topeka. It's not really a term and a definition. It's more like a question and an answer. You actually can add images, and I think this means you can record audio. I do not do either of those things, but that's kind of cool. Here, you know, this is where you title your list, and because you need to be able to navigate this, you want to give it a pretty obvious name. You don't want to have it end up being like untitled list because that doesn't help you when you're searching for it later. So be really clear. Here, when you make it public, that's what's helping other people who are searching. So thanks to the guy who made all of his drive right ones public, because then our Mr. Westner could find them. Okay, so you can turn that off if there's something there that you don't want people to see, but I think probably the standard thing is that most people are leaving it public. You might want to make it, and by default, it's going to say you are the only one who can edit it. I think that you probably want to keep it that way. And then you create your list, and then it adds it to your information. I'm just trying to go back to more of like the dashboard screen. Okay, like more of this type of type of screen. So these are my study sets. These are my lists. Okay, so you notice when I'm looking at this, I am the creator. That sounded really omnipotent in a weird way. Okay, so when you look at this, it's a little bit different than this. Latest activity is showing me that I looked up Drive Right, which I didn't create. I looked up this word list because my students were taking a quiz over these words, but I didn't create it. Your study sets is literally the ones I've created. Okay, so I did modify some of these SAT word lists. These are like words you need to know. They recommend these words for all standardized tests or for college-bound seniors. So I use some of these word lists. If I've modified one of the lists, then it's showing up under my sets. Okay, and this Kansas one, I actually didn't create that one. You guys might have noticed when we used it. I searched for it, but because I modified it slightly, even just in some of the spelling and punctuation, it is now showing up as one of mine. So these are like mine as opposed to just the ones I've actually searched and used. Okay, so here are the ones I've used. And then you can create, oh wow, this is new. I haven't noticed that. Congrats, whoever that is. Okay, you can create a class. I told you kind of my backstory with that. I don't think it's super, super important, but you can probably think of a lot of creative ways that your students could be grouped into a class, and maybe you think that would be helpful. For me, as long as they knew what to search here, it was going pretty fast. And you know, I did a lot of QR codes to Quizlets too, like like if my students came in the room and as a bell ringer activity, if I wanted them to start playing quiz trade, I would just put a QR code on the screen and I would say, just open this list and start playing. And then it would take them to the exact right list and they could start playing the game with the flashcards. So that's another way to get students where you need them to be. I think I forgot to show you this though, and I'll just look at the Kansas list. I wanted to show you what some of your options are for printing. This is helpful, I think. Okay, so I will go back and show you it one more time so you know where I came from. Okay, so I'm just on a list. We played this last week in my room, just on this list. But if you look here at print, and remember, if you're on an app, it's looking different. I'm on the web-based version, Quizlet.com. If I hit print, I actually have a lot of options here, and these might be helpful to your students. I don't know if perhaps this is what my college students are telling me they like, but I like the idea that you can print it in a lot of different formats, big flashcards, small ones, index cards. You can print a test. You can tell them if you want the terms alphabetized or if you don't want them alphabetized, and in what order, if you want term definition or vice versa. It's just going to create a PDF for you that then you can print. So this is sort of helpful if you want anything on paper, and or some of these are formats you could still use digitally, but they're just going to give you a really nice print screen. And then notice here too, this is generating a short URL for you. And so this is kind of what I was using to make QR codes basically. Like if you want students to just get here fast so they can study this list, for me, it was less important that students had logins to Quizlet and less important that they were like a part of my class. It was just more important that they could get here and look at the list. Okay, this is fast. Get here, look at the list. We want to play a game with it or we want to study it. So this like URL short web address was kind of what I wanted mostly when we were using it. Okay, so that's a lot of the ways that I use Quizlet in class. Just remember, you can start by making a lot of lists, but depending on what you're teaching, and maybe grade level too. I mean, I guess probably if you're teaching 7th through 12th grade, the likelihood of you finding someone else who's made the list is probably greater. Maybe this is not like a K6 tool necessarily, but you might give it a whirl and just see what you find there if you search for lists. I think it's pretty cool. Remember, 12 words in a list to make it count for Quizlet Live. Okay, so just, I'm about to use a fancy word. It might be part of their algorithm, is that the right word? That they need a certain number of words in the list to make the game. And similarly, you need 6 students to start a game. So if you have a class smaller than 6, it's going to be hard to play a Quizlet Live. And you know, if you have a list of 10 terms, as I often did when we were doing vocabulary, I just added a couple of extra words, either old ones to review or whatever, because you just want those lists to have at least 12 words to play the game. And if you have a list with more than 12 words, even better, you know. So, I mean, just lots of ways then that game could be used to review or to study. I can tell you, I think we talked about this in my room. I've never paid for anything. I'm not even using what they call like their teacher account or teacher license. I mean, I am a teacher, but I don't know if Quizlet thinks of me as a teacher because I don't pay for anything. So I guess there's probably even more features and more things that you can unlock once you've paid for the service. But I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with what I have and I like it and don't feel like I would need to pay for more features based on how I'm using it. But please share the tips with us. If you end up getting a different account or you pay for something, let us know how it works because I would love to hear more about that. Everybody that I know that's using it, and it's quite a few of us at our high school, nobody's paying for anything that I know of, and we still like it a lot. So remember, you can use it to print something that looks like a worksheet or a flashcard, but lots of options for games. I mean, even when you're thinking about fast finisher work or sponge work, if they're reviewing some list of terminology or vocab word lists and playing those games like the matching game or the scatter game, I mean, I guess it's better for their brains and a lot of other things they could be doing on iPads or on a computer. So don't forget that as an option. Even if you actually aren't playing Quizlet Live as a class, you could still be asking students to go in and play certain games to review. Okay, so this is what I was going to tell you about Quizlet Live. This obviously isn't an hour. Just watch this. It will count as one of the videos. There's no other strings attached, and I'm not asking you to join a Google Hangout. But by your request, this is one of the tools you wanted to learn more about. So hopefully I've answered some of those questions and let you look at the screen in real time and see kind of what that looks like when you're making lists. Let me know if you think of anything else related to Quizlet, though, and I will try to answer it in the next video. Hope everybody is having a great weekend. Bye.